Senator Patterson, you have the call.
Thanks, Chair. Welcome, officers. I'd like to follow up on the last round of estimates in relation to the Direction 99 matter, and in particular the breakdown in protocol in notifying the Minister for Immigration about priority cases. You took on notice then, or you said you were investigating then, how that happened, and so I was wondering if there's an update that you can share.
Certainly, Senator Patterson. As I indicated last time, the issue was primarily one around the resourcing that had been allocated to that function. And so I've now had a chance to go back and look at how that's worked. So if we look back over the last 9 or 10 years, the caseload in our overall character cancellation area has increased by about 220%. The resourcing has gone up by about 30%. So there's been a real mismatch between caseload and resourcing allocated. Within that staffing profile, over the last 6 to 7 years, which was the period at which I could feel confident about the data, we've had between 1 and 3 people working on the AAT set-aside caseload within that broader one as part of their duties. So that's not 1 to 3 full-time people. They've been doing other things as well. And so the rate at which the decisions were being brought to cancellation briefs that the Minister could action was not timely, as I said last time, not acceptable. Over that same period, roughly, we've pulled the data on the decisions that were made in relation to AAT caseload. I'll explain why I've done it that way in a moment. And the average time to process a brief from about 2014-15 to now was about 6 months, though there was significant variation in that.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for clarity? 6 months to process a brief to notify the Minister about an AAT case?
No, to provide the Minister with a brief of to progress with a cancellation or not.
Based on an adverse AAT decision? Based on an
adverse AAT decision.
Right.
So, as I said, there was quite a bit of variation. So if I look at 2014-15, it was 22 days. 2018-19 was 21 days. But 15-16 was 1,225 days. 16-17 was 334. And so on averaging that out across the period, it was, as I said, roughly 6 months. The reason I've gone with the 54 decisions is because we have to pull all of that data completely manually. We have to go back and look at each decision, each meeting brief, each decision brief to try and pull that data. We don't have a way of just going into the system. We are still working on more comprehensive data, but that gives us a sort of indication of what's been happening. There have been, since 2014, 54 Minister decisions on AAT set-asides, so either cancelling or not overturning the decision, out of a total set-aside number of 1,063. So a relatively small number of decisions. Again, that's been relatively consistent across the period, but the numbers are quite small. We had, as I said, it's roughly 5 cancellations a year. In a couple of years it was 9 and 10, which varies the outcome a little bit, but the numbers are pretty low, as you can see from that data. Since the new arrangements were outlined in relation to MD99 in March 2023, the progress of cases to the Minister was consistent with the delay over the 10-year average. And of course, since the end of May, we've surged resources to clear the backlog, and we can take you through those figures if you wish to. And obviously, Mr Thomas and Mr McMahon can help us with more detailed analysis.
Thank you. That table that you're reading from, those statistics you're reading from, is that in a format that you could provide to the committee?
That was my notes pulled out from all the briefings I've had trying to make a narrative. So it's not actually in a tabular format.
Okay. Can I ask on notice then that you provide those statistics that you're referring to by year? That will be helpful. When we last discussed this, and you just repeated then, you've said not in a timely way, but at other points ministers have said that, and I think including the Immigration Minister, that he was never notified about some of the cases. So it's still not completely clear to me, in my mind, are we dealing with delayed notification or no notification, or both?
So it is delayed notification, Senator, but in some cases the delays are so significant that, as I said, outliers we can see sometimes years in providing the notification. And so from the Minister's perspective, in whatever government, it is a non-notification until we get it to them. And where that's been a very significant period, I think it's almost a moot point. I talked to you last time about the pipeline or the backlog. So where cases are identified as requiring escalation, they will be escalated. It's just a matter of when they'll be escalated.
I don't think it's a moot point, and my distinct impression based on their public commentary is that the ministers don't think it's a moot point, because if a notification is so delayed that they never receive it, then that's different to just receiving it lately, right? Not in a non-prompt way, because obviously this requires a decision of the minister, and they can't make a decision until they get the brief.
I think that's the point I was trying to make awkwardly, Senator, that if I say it's a delayed advice, but for the period that the minister isn't getting the brief, it is, in effect, a non-notification to him until it gets to him.
But it sounds like, at least I'm trying to be charitable to the minister and the government here, that there were some decisions that the minister was not able to make because the brief was not provided to him until it became a contentious issue in the media and it was, expedited and given to him. But prior to that, he hadn't received anything.
So he had received some briefs, Senator?
No, but on that particular case, so just the hypothetical case, if the minister hasn't been notified, he can't make a decision, and therefore it's not just a non-timely notification, it's a non-notification.
At that point in time, it's a non-notification.
Yeah.
That's why I was sort of saying it was a moot point, because from the perspective of the minister, whether it's not with him.
Yes, exactly. So this is what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. How many instances were never given to the minister? How many instances were given to the minister in a timely way? How many times was it given to the minister in a non-timely way?
So I've talked about the averages, Senator, and I'm sure Mr Thomas and Mr McMahon can go into some more detail for us. As I said, there were some which were quite timely. There are others which were not at all, but I haven't identified any which were identified as requiring escalation, which were not either escalated for decision or still in a process to be escalated.
Right.
So that's why I'm sort of hesitating to say never provided, because
Sure, but
they are on their way.
If it's in a process to be escalated for so long that it never gets to the minister's desk, that's as good as not being notified, right?
So some of them get there, Senator, after a very considerable time.
Right.
But for that period where they're not with him or her, then they're not in a position to action them or, in some cases, know about them.
So the distinct impression I had from our last discussion about this in the estimates was that something changed, that this is a uniquely bad backlog that had arisen in a recent time, and that is what impeded the government's ability to do the normal cancellation process. But what you're saying to me now is that this is a continuation of a problem that's been around for a while, and that there was nothing particularly unique about the delays for this minister.
So, yes, Senator, and that's what I was trying to say last time when I referred to the increasing caseload, which started around a decade ago,
Sure.
and the mismatch with the resources. And so, when we say, how could this happen, I think the answer is when it happens over an extended period like that, it almost becomes normalised.
But something has changed, because we've learnt about dozens of cases of people who had their decision for their visa to be cancelled by the department overturned in the AAT, released into the community, that the government has said is totally unacceptable to them, and they would never have allowed had they been notified in a timely way. That is not something that was common previously. It has become common recently. So what is it that changed if it's not the department's processing?
So, Senator, from the statistics that I've been able to pull together, it would appear to me that both the rate, the timeliness of the briefs on average, and the rate of decision making were relatively stable over that time. And so, what I can't know is what was happening prior to...
Sure, but what's caused this surge in instances of people being released into the community that the government has said should never be released into the community?
So I think there's one other sort of statistic that's probably relevant, and I'll get my colleagues to help me, that there has been an increase in the number of cases going to the AAT, and therefore an increase in the number of set-asides that have increased the number of cases requiring escalation.
Can you walk me through those numbers?
Okay, Senator. Michael Thomas, Group Manager, Immigration Compliance. So I'll just go through the last 10 years of AAT cases, if that is helpful. So in the 2016 year, there was 22 AAT outcomes. In 16-17, 156. In 17-18, 221. In 18-19, 322. In 19-20, 279. 2021, 461. 21-22, 348. 22-23, 512. So it's been increasing over time, and then the department loss rate, so to speak, where the AAT has set aside a decision, the department's had a loss, has also similarly increased over that as a proportion. So using those same years from 15 onwards, I'll just go through the numbers, but it's yearly, from 15-16 onwards, so 5, 32, 53, 85 in 18-19, 94, 155, 137 in 21-22, 247 in 22-23. So that has resulted in more people having their cancellation overturned.
Do you have that in percentage terms, the percentage of...
I do, yes.
Can you take me through that?
So the percentage of loss is 23% in 15-16, 21% in 16-17, 24% in 17-18, 26% in 18-19, 34% in 19-20, 34% in 20-21, 39% in 21-22, 48% in 22-23.
That last year's a big increase. What was the cause of that big increase?
It could have came from a range of factors.
Maybe Direction 99?
But possibly also because the department delegates were making more decisions as well, so more cases were flowing to the AAT.
Is Direction 99 the reason why there was a big increase?
I couldn't conclusively say that, Senator.
There seems to be a hell of a coincidence there that the year in which Direction 99 became operational, or the year after it became operational, there's a significant jump in the proportion of cases that the department was losing at the AAT.
If it assists, Senator, the loss rate under MD 99 was 50% and the loss rate under MD 90 was 44%, just as a comparison.
It's pretty consistent with the department's advice to government that the change in Direction 99 would increase the proportion of people who were allowed to stay in our country.
I think you've also got the previous direction at 45%.
I was just going to say, the figures that I've been given, and we might need to clarify the differences here, is that under Ministerial Direction 99, the proportion of visa cancellations overturned by the AAT was, I think, 50%, and under Ministerial Direction 90, which was issued when Mr Dutton was the Minister for Home Affairs, was 49%.
Well, it's not the figures that Mr Thomas has
It might be
given
that we're
us.
comparing different years. It might be that Mr Thomas's figures are from when there was a different minister, but when Mr Dutton was the minister, it was basically the same.
So our figures are obviously not tied to a minister. Our figures are tied to a direction.
Indeed. Mr Thomas, those figures that you read out from the table, is that in a form that can be tabled?
It's not cleanly. It's part of a broader...
I'm not worried about it
on it.
having a few marks on it. I mean, if it contains material that can't be tabled, that's one matter, but is there anything that stops you from tabling that?
Senator, can we have a look at that quickly and see if there's anything that would stop us doing that?
I'd be grateful if you could do that quickly. Sure. So it does appear to me that there was an impact from Direction 99, both in we have a very significant increase in the number of AAT cases launched. Maybe they've got legal advice based on Direction 99 that they'd be more likely to be successful.
It also might be that the number of cancellations had increased.
Well, is that the case?
Sorry, so in terms of general cancellations?
Yes.
Across the board? I've only got the last 3 years, but the total cancellations under Section 501, 656 in 21-22, 625 in 22-23, and 387 in year-to-date to 31st of March for this financial year.
Data that goes back any further than that?
Apologies, no, Senator, I don't.
Okay, be grateful.
I can tell you, for example, Senator Patterson, that Minister Giles has cancelled more visas under this power this year than any single year under Mr Dutton.
Minister, that wasn't the question. I'm not surprised
No, but
that's
it's
the
important
case.
context.
The question is about the departmental cancellations, not the minister's cancellations. Of course the minister has had to cancel more because the AAT has overturned more and it's become a massive public controversy. That's
not the only basis.
That's not
for
evidence of a
cancellation.
successful
That's
system.
not the only basis for cancellation.
Anyway, it wasn't the question. The question was about the department's cancellation. I know the Prime Minister doesn't understand the distinction and thinks the AAT can overturn ministers' decisions, but I hope you don't suffer from that misapprehension as well. Mr Thomas, I'd be grateful if you could provide that further historical data so we can make that comparison and happy to share the call.